Tom Hanks spent a lifetime making America feel safe. But that was the one thing his own childhood never fully gave him. Born into a home that soon broke apart, then forced to move from house to house before he was old enough to understand why, he learned early how quickly warmth could disappear. Decades later, the world would trust that smile in Forrest Gump, Saving Private Ryan, Cast Away, and Philadelphia, finding hope, decency, and quiet courage in the man America came to know as Hollywood's most beloved everyman. But today, at 70, behind the kindness America still loves, Tom Hanks is facing a quieter storm, health challenges of his own and those of Rita Wilson, the wife who has stood beside him for nearly 4 decades. Before we begin, honor Tom Hanks with a like and subscribe to the channel. A quiet tribute to the man who helped millions believe life could still be kinder, even while carrying burdens the world rarely saw. Pain found Tom Hanks before the world ever learned to trust his smile. Born on July 9, 1956, in Concord, California, he came into a life with little softness to lean on. His father, Amos, moved from kitchen to kitchen as a cook, earning enough to survive but never enough to settle. His mother, Janet, was still searching for her own ground. Money was thin, but certainty was thinner. In 1960, when Tom was only 4, his parents' marriage came apart not in thunder, but in a silence cold enough to divide a childhood. The family split in two. Tom and 2 siblings followed their father through temporary jobs and borrowed addresses, while the youngest brother remained with their mother. To adults, it was a divorce. To a child, it was the only world he knew packed into separate lives. By 10, Tom lived in 10 houses, cramped rentals with peeling walls, strange smells, and the ghost of other families still in the rooms. He learned the shape of borrowed beds, unfamiliar ceilings, simple meals, and schools where nobody knew his name long enough to miss him. Each move meant another cafeteria table, another hallway, another lesson in becoming invisible. Clothes were worn until they frayed. Space was accepted, not claimed. He learned not to unpack too much, because a small suitcase near the door, worn school shoes by the bed, and a ceiling he already knew he might soon leave behind, made every room feel like a goodbye waiting to happen. His home was not a place on a map. It was the suitcase he carried without complaint. He became a boy who knew how to stay out of the way, a child who would later remember himself as awkward and outside the circle, though that description only brushed the surface. Beneath it was a quieter wound. He learned too early that wanting a steady home could hurt more than pretending not to need one, yet one room finally answered him. In dusty school auditoriums beneath buzzing lights, Tom discovered the stage, a place where becoming someone else made him feel, for once, like himself. There, people listened. Applause did not fix the loneliness, but it interrupted it, giving oxygen to a boy who had spent years holding his breath. Then the curtain would fall, the lights would dim, and he would return to another strange room, another temporary bed, another version of home that never stayed long enough to become safe. Decades later, Tom described those years with one smaller, devastating word: lonely. That word is almost unbearable coming from the man America would one day see as warmth, decencies, and connection. But perhaps that is where the gentleness began. In those unsettled nights, he seemed to make a private promise. If he ever found a voice, he would use it to help others feel less unseen. America would one day call him comforting, but that comfort was not born from ease. It was built by a boy who knew exactly what it meant to feel unseen. New York did not look at Tom Hanks and see a future icon. In 1977, after leaving Sacramento State University, the 21-year-old arrived with a battered suitcase, an old typewriter, and the old childhood instinct he had carried from 10 different homes. Do not settle too deeply, because the world may ask you to leave again. The city that looked golden from a distance felt hard at street level. Expensive rooms, narrow beds, cold nights, and strangers. Close enough to hear breathing, but not close enough to care. He was young, but the fear inside him already felt old. He shared apartments, slept on couches and floors, counted coins for food, and carried his dreams carefully, as if even hope needed to stay small. Audition rooms became their own kind of weather. He would step inside, offer what he had, and leave with the same polite smile, folding another rejection into his coat pocket like an unpaid bill. The people behind the desks rarely saw the leading man America would later trust. They saw a thin young actor with an unusual voice, little swagger, and too much decency for a business that often mistook kindness for weakness. Each unanswered call pulled him back to the boy who had once sat in school cafeterias feeling temporary. Only now the cafeteria had become New York, and the empty table had become every room that decided it had no place for him. But those years did not waste him. They hardened his patience without hardening his heart. Tom took small off-Broadway roles, accepted low-budget work like 1980s. He Knows You're Alone Because Rent Did Not Wait, and gave himself fully to the Great Lakes Theater Festival in Cleveland, where in the late 1970s Betty's he acted, built sets, hung lights, and swept the stage after others had gone. That was where glamour fell away and craft remained. He learned to arrive before anyone noticed, stay after anyone cared, and keep working without being promised a reward. By 1980, at 24, Bosom Buddies opened a strange little door, a quirky sitcom, an absurd premise, a character dressing as a woman to get an apartment. It was not the grand entrance Destiny would later pretend it was. It was a crack in a wall he had been pressing against with tired hands. Even then, every ending frightened him. One canceled job could still feel like a bus station waiting in the dark suitcase at his feet. Years later, he would understand that he had not been chasing fame as much as fighting invisibility. The boy with no fixed home was still there, asking only to be kept in the room a little longer. The world would one day call Tom Hanks Hollywood's kindest soul. But that kindness was never softness without scars. It was the discipline of a man who knew what it meant to be overlooked, and chose, again and again, not to overlook anyone else. The world applauded Tom Hanks for disappearing into his roles, without seeing what each disappearance took, from the man who had to come back. To audiences, his rise looked almost graceful. The innocent magic of Big, the aching truth of Philadelphia, the open-hearted wonder of Forrest Gump, the moral weight of Saving Private Ryan, and the stripped-down solitude of Cast Away. But behind each beloved performance was a private cost paid in discipline, exhaustion, doubt, and pieces of himself no camera could fully return. For Philadelphia, he lost nearly 35 pounds and entered a story shaped by fear, misunderstanding, and human dignity under pressure. The transformation did not end when filming stopped. The weight had left his body, but a certain lightness seemed to leave with it, as if the role had asked him to carry a chill no costume could remove. And what came next would only deepen the burden hidden beneath the applause. Forrest Gump brought Tom Hanks a kind of love most actors only dream of, yet even that triumph carried its own pressure. By choosing a share of the film's earnings instead of a fixed $7 million salary, he made a bold gamble that eventually brought him more than $70 million. But success at that scale can become its own private test. Suddenly, every future choice seemed to stand beneath the shadow of a miracle. In Saving Private Ryan, he carried the weight of war with restraint, respect, and a moral seriousness that left the body tired in one way and the soul tired in another. In Cast Away, production was divided so his body could reflect a man reduced to survival, and the silence of that role did not simply end when the cameras stopped. Isolation had become more than performance. It followed him out of the frame, lingering in the quiet rooms after work was done. Audiences saw greatness. He lived the toll. Fame did not hand him rest. It demanded consistency, publicity, discipline, and the impossible expectation that he remain America's gentle everyman, even on days when kindness itself must have felt heavy to carry. There were moments when success seemed like a beautiful coat lined with weight. The world trusted his warmth, and that trust became another responsibility. Away from the camera, the familiar kindness in his eyes was not always ease. Sometimes it was fatigue held with grace. Still, Tom Hanks kept returning to the work with humility, reading, preparing, listening, trying to honor real lives instead of chasing noise. He once reflected that only a small number of his many films truly felt complete by his own standard, a confession that revealed the ache of an artist who never wanted to give the audience anything hollow. That is why his highest point was never simply a throne. It was a narrow ledge walked with care, where praise became pressure, recognition became duty, and every role carried one quiet hope: that someone leaving the theater might feel a little less alone. The car stayed parked longer than it should have. Some nights, after filming another scene about family, Tom Hanks would sit beside an empty house with his hands still on the wheel, the dashboard dimming in front of him, listening to the engine fade and knowing no applause could follow him through that door. Hollywood was beginning to love him, but love from the world could not quiet the ache of a home he had not been able to hold together. Years earlier, long before he became America's trusted face of kindness, he had been a young man carrying the fracture of his own childhood, reaching for marriage, as if it might become the shelter he never fully had. His first marriage to Samantha Lewis came from tenderness, fear, and loneliness tangled together. At 21, he became a husband, then a father, while part of him already knew he was too young for the pressure arriving at his door. Later, he would understand that he had mistaken the need to feel safe for the strength to build a life, and that confusion left marks no award could remove. As his career gathered speed, the quiet cracks widened. Samantha, gentle yet carrying her own burdens, was drawn into a life moving faster than either of them knew how to slow. By 1987, their marriage ended, and the sorrow was larger than divorce. Colin and Elizabeth now had to move between two homes, repeating the pattern Tom had once promised himself he would never pass down. That irony cut deeply. The actor the public would come to see as steady, warm, and fatherly was privately wondering whether he had failed the two children who needed him most. There were hotel rooms where the silence felt heavier than criticism. There were missed bedtime stories, school moments, and ordinary chances to say he was proud before the moment slipped away. Sometimes the distance in a child's eyes frightened him more than any bad review. On screen, he could speak love with perfect timing. Off screen, love had to face calendars, absences, and the painful truth that a father's heart cannot always repair the hours he was not there. The last tenderness came in rooms where no camera belonged. When Samantha later faced lung cancer, Tom was no longer her husband, but he stepped forward with care, helping through that painful chapter, visiting often, sitting beside her as the room grew quiet, and honoring the woman who had once shared his youth, his fear, and his first attempt at building a family. He could not restore the marriage. He could not give the children one unbroken childhood. He could not protect Samantha from the illness before them. Still, he showed up because kindness was the only bridge left standing. In those rooms, there was no beloved star, no public symbol of decency, no man wrapped safely in the affection of millions. There was only someone looking back at the promises of his younger self and trying, late but sincerely, to answer them with presence. That is the quiet wound inside this chapter of Tom Hanks's life. Not scandal, not spectacle, but a father sitting with what he could not undo, a former husband holding on with gentleness, and a man loved by the world, still learning that the people closest to us often need the version no camera ever sees. Some wounds never ask to be noticed. They simply stay, quiet and unfinished, in the places love once tried its hardest. The hospital chair taught Tom Hanks what applause could never do. In 2015, when Rita Wilson faced breast cancer, the world outside still knew him as the warmest man in Hollywood, the steady voice, the beloved face, the one who always seemed able to make fear feel smaller. Inside appointment rooms and recovery spaces, none of that mattered. Rita, the woman who had become his second chance at peace, underwent a double mastectomy with reconstructive surgery, and suddenly fame had no language. Awards could not soften the hours. Scripts could not lift the fear from the room. Tom could only pull the hospital chair closer, watch a paper cup grow cold beside them, hold her hand when she needed it, help her through the slow rhythm of treatment, and learn again that love is proved in the quiet minutes when someone is tired, frightened, and still trying to smile. Their marriage, built since 1988 after the turbulence of his first divorce, had always looked rare from the outside. Hands joined at premieres, soft glances under flashbulbs. Children raised in a home that seemed steady despite the pressure of work. Yet, Rita was never simply the woman beside him on a red carpet. She was the person who had steadied him more times than the world would ever know. The one who understood the regrets he carried, the fears he rarely named, and the old wounds that did not ask for attention but never fully left. When her health was tested, Tom was not playing strength. He was trying to become it, hour by hour, because the woman who had held his life together now needed him to stand without shaking. Recovery came, yet innocence did not return with it. Once life has made a person wait for medical results, count difficult mornings, and listen for changes in a loved one's breathing, calm never feels quite as simple again. Rita survived that chapter, but both of them carried its lesson quietly. Tom already knew the body could be fragile. He had been managing type 2 diabetes since 2013, with a discipline that rarely became public drama. Then, in 2020, while he was filming in Australia, another uncertainty entered their lives. As COVID-19 spread across the world, Tom and Rita became among the first major public figures to test positive. Rita was hit hard. Taste and smell faded. Exhaustion settled deep. Fever lingered longer than anyone wanted. For Tom, then 63 and living with diabetes, the diagnosis carried a sharper edge than a passing illness. The man so often asked to embody resilience became, almost overnight, a face of shared vulnerability. Their world narrowed to isolation, medical checks, sterile walls, and the familiar sound of each other trying to stay calm. During long nights far from home, he sent careful messages to those who worried, kept his humor close, and allowed the public to see that even the most trusted face in Hollywood could suddenly become fragile. It was not panic. It was the sober tenderness of a man who knew tomorrow is never guaranteed by fame, timing, or good intentions. Still, they leaned toward each other. Tom tried to coax a smile from Rita when she barely had the strength to sit up. Rita, even while weakened, remained the presence that made the room feel less empty. He stayed steady because love had already trained him where to place his feet when fear entered the room. When recovery finally came, gratitude arrived with a quieter shadow. His body seemed to ask for more patience than before. Some days carried a slower rhythm, a quieter caution, and the daily discipline of type 2 diabetes remained part of his life. Every step back into public carried its own private meaning. In public, he kept the charm people trusted. In private, the questions were smaller and more human. How long can a man keep carrying everyone's idea of strength? And what happens when he becomes the one who needs a steady hand on the stairs? Through breast cancer, COVID, chronic illness, fame, and the private tremors that never reach a camera, Tom and Rita did not become a perfect love story. They became a lived one. The real image was never only the red carpet smile. It was a chair pulled close to a hospital bed, a hand held during treatment, a note written in isolation, a tired laugh shared when the room felt too heavy. If one hand ever needs the rail, the other still knows where to find Rita's. What steadied Tom Hanks was never only talent or timing. It was hard-won, unpolished devotion, the kind that does not ask to be admired, only trusted. And perhaps that is why their bond still moves people. Because behind the kindness America loves is a man who has sat in quiet rooms with fear, and beside him, a woman who kept reaching back. Their story endures because when the glamour fell away, when the lights went out, and when life asked for more than applause could ever give, they were still there, hand in hand, breathing through the dark together. Nothing frightens a father like watching his child move beyond the reach of his hands. For Tom Hanks, the hardest trial did not come under studio lights or before an audience. It came through Chet, the son whose struggles turned private fear into public sorrow. To the world, Tom was dignity made familiar, humble, gentle, steady, the man so many Americans trusted like a father. Yet admiration offers no protection when your own child is hurting. Chet was born into privilege, into a family name built on decencies and perseverance. But his road soon bent away from the calm image surrounding his parents. Personal struggles, public missteps, and difficult headlines followed him into a spotlight Tom never asked for and could not control. For a man who had spent his life trying to break the instability of his own childhood, watching his son stumble must have felt like history returning through a door he had tried to keep closed. In 2015, Tom supported Chet quietly through rehab, not as a celebrity managing a problem, but as a father reaching for any rope that might still hold. Headlines rarely understand recovery. They flatten pain into spectacle, and the noise around Chet did not disappear quickly. Public controversy, difficult social media moments, and reports surrounding a 2015 car accident brought more attention to a family that had long guarded its dignity. Reports said Chet asked the other driver not to contact authorities, raising questions that later pulled Tom and Rita's names into a legal matter they had not created. To the public, it was controversy. To Tom, it was another night with the phone too heavy in his hand. He had spent decades building a reputation for integrity, and now his son's name was moving through headlines no parent would ever wish to see. Chet would later describe himself as the one who never seemed to fit the family picture, a phrase Tom did not need to repeat for it to wound him. Still, Tom did not turn away. He did not answer pain with public anger, denial, or distance. He stayed quiet. He stayed present. Late-night rooms, unanswered fears, a father waiting for the call that might bring relief or break the heart again. That was the private weight no award could soften. Perhaps he recognized pieces of his own younger loneliness in Chet's search for belonging. In time, Chet has spoken about sobriety and the strain of growing up beneath a famous name. Yet the scars of those years do not vanish simply because a better chapter begins. For Tom, the wound was never about reputation alone. It was the ache of a father learning that love cannot rescue a child on command, but it must keep reaching anyway. There is a specific kind of silence in a house where a child is struggling, a silence louder than any theater applause. For Tom, the way through it was never a grand gesture, never a public statement, never a perfect line delivered at the right moment. It was the simple, exhausting discipline of being there. The America's dad the world loved was an image placed upon him, but the father waiting in the dark, close to the phone, hoping his son would find his way home, that was the man behind the legend. Some mornings, the hardest role Tom Hanks plays begins before anyone sees him smile. In a quiet kitchen, there is the careful plate, the small routine, the private check that reminds him. Type 2 diabetes has no final curtain. Diagnosed in 2013, the condition follows him with stricter discipline, slower recoveries, and the knowledge that one careless choice can unsettle the balance. There is a sharp irony in this for a man who once transformed his body for Castaway in Philadelphia. Back then, cameras watched the sacrifice. Now the harder work happens off-screen. In tired mornings, measured meals, and the patience required when energy no longer returns on command. The public sees the charming elder statesman, still warm, still witty, still able to make a room feel safe. They do not see the muscles that tire faster, the careful pace, or the quiet victories won before the day has even begun. Respect can become its own lonely crown. At the height of success, Tom has spoken of feeling adrift, surrounded by people yet touched by a solitude no ovation could reach. After the applause, there are hotel rooms. After the red carpet, there is the question of what remains when the room goes still. Perfectionism, the same force that helped build his legacy, can also press hard against the spirit. A missed beat, a line that could have landed better, a moment misread. These doubts do not retire just because the world has already approved of you. With age, the fear changes shape. It becomes less about rejection and more about being remembered only for yesterday, while today must be guarded with care. Yet the sharpest ache may come through his children. Colin has built a worthy career, but often under the outline of a father's enormous silhouette. Chet has faced personal struggles and difficult public moments, and Tom has carried the helplessness of a parent who cannot shield a child from every hard road. For a man who once tried so fiercely to give his family steadiness, seeing old shadows return must have cut deeply, not as scandal, but as a father's fear that pieces of his own early loneliness might still have found their way forward. He gave them a name the world recognized, but the harder inheritance was quieter. how to carry silence after the camera stopped, how to remain kind when life did not feel simple, and how to keep walking through questions no parent can fully answer. In that, Tom Hanks was not a perfect father shaped by a perfect life. He was a human one, loved by millions, yet still learning, like every parent, how to stand beside the people who mattered most. Kindest may be the most human answer he has given to all of it. The warmth the world celebrates did not come from ease. It grew from knowing what it feels like to be unseen, unsettled, and afraid of being left behind. So he gives time, attention, resources, and care to people and causes beyond himself. Yet even generosity asks for strength, and a man who keeps giving must learn to leave room for his own healing. That is the part of Tom Hanks' story that rarely makes noise. His battles are not explosive. They are slow, subtle, daily, and deeply human. Illness, age, family worry, loneliness after a claim, and the pressure to keep smiling when the body and heart both ask for gentler pacing. If you look beyond the carpets, speeches, and cherished films, you will find a life shaped not only by triumph, but by private losses carried with steady courage. This, too, is Tom Hanks. Not only the beloved figure America trusts, but a man who still rises, checks the morning, steadies his breath, and walks into the day with grace. No camera, no applause, yet still a victory. A quiet kitchen can reveal more about Tom Hanks now than any red carpet ever could. At 70, Tom Hanks remains one of Hollywood's most beloved and enduring figures, with public estimates often placing his net worth near $400 million. Yet the calm around him is not decoration. It is evidence of a life patiently tended. The number itself tells the least important part of the story. His reported Forrest Gump earnings and his careful investments in homes and retreats may suggest wealth. But what they truly reveal is something quieter. A man who learned to turn success into shelter, not spectacle. In Los Angeles and across quieter retreats far from the noise of Hollywood, the homes around him seem less like trophies than places where life can finally slow down. Even the memory of a Bay Area houseboat from his younger years now feels less like trivia than a reminder. Home is where a person can finally exhale. These places are not interesting because they are expensive. They matter because they answer an old wound. The boy who once moved from house to house, who learned not to unpack too deeply, now lives in rooms that wait for him. Perhaps that is why every quiet morning matters. Reading glasses resting beside a script, keys left on the kitchen table, Rita's voice from another room, and sunlight slipping softly across a quiet floor. After decades of motion, peace is not a prize he displays. It is a shelter he keeps repairing. What holds that shelter together is not luxury, but devotion repeated until it becomes structure. Rita Wilson remains the center beside him, wife, partner, creative mirror, and witness through storms never staged for public sympathy. She faced breast cancer. She endured COVID-19. Through those frightening chapters, their marriage became something rarer than Hollywood romance, a daily act of staying. As a father, Tom remains close to Colin, Elizabeth, Chet, and Truman, not as a judge standing above them, but as a compass nearby. He honors Colin's craft, protects Elizabeth's privacy, watches the public journeys of Chet and Truman with patience, and quietly hopes as a more mature, sober Chet keeps building forward. The same restraint appears in his giving. Cancer research, homelessness relief, arts education, hospitals, schools, and organizations built around dignity and opportunity have all felt the reach of Tom and Rita's support. He does not make generosity look like performance. He makes it look like presence. And that may be the clearest sign of who he has become. A man who understands that abundance means little unless it creates safety, possibility, and dignity for someone beyond himself. That is why the calm around him feels earned, not accidental. Tom no longer seems driven by the hunger to be everywhere. He chooses roles and projects with emotional or cultural gravity. Work like A Man Called Otto, continued partnerships with Steven Spielberg, reflective conversations on podcasts, and writing that turns toward history, character, and humanity. He also carries a quieter public presence now. Less chasing, more choosing, less noise, more meaning. In interviews and written pieces, he seems drawn to ordinary people who keep going, Soldiers, fathers, neighbors, workers, families, and forgotten lives that history too easily passes by. It feels connected to the boy he once was, the child who knew what it meant to feel temporary, and to the actor he became, the man who understood that stories can give strangers a place to rest. He still walks beside Rita, jokes with fans, takes long drives through Los Angeles in vintage or electric cars, and carries himself without needing to prove he is Tom Hanks. The calm around him is not the absence of pain. It is perspective after pain. It is the wisdom of a man who learned that applause can fill a room and still fail to quiet a heart, unless the life behind it is tended with care. What endures most about him is not the shelf of honors, but the way he makes decency feel possible again. Kindness in his life is not a mood, it is a discipline. Integrity is not a speech, it is what remains when no camera is watching. He has moved through hardship without turning it into spectacle, carried success without mistaking it for purpose, and turned empathy into a craft that keeps working after the lights go down. His scars did not become walls, they became maps. His hope is not naive, it is practiced. And maybe that is the lesson his life leaves behind. Goodness is not a grand gesture, but a habit built in ordinary hours. So if Tom Hanks has ever made a hard day feel lighter, through a line, a look, or the simple decency he brought into your living room, leave a tribute below. Tap the like button as a small salute, and share the moment he reminded you that goodness is not gone. Sometimes goodness survives in a boy who once learned not to unpack too deeply, then grows into a man who spends his life making other people feel there is still a room where they can rest.